Al-Muqaddimah, The Introduction to History and Sociology by Abdurrahman Ibn Khaldun. Part 2. The nature of human civilization, and what is presented in it from the nomads and the settled, the overcoming, earning, livelihood, crafts, sciences, and similar matters, along with their causes and reasons. Know that the essence of history is a report about human society, which is the civilization of the world and the conditions that arise from the nature of that civilization, such as savagery and civility, tribal affiliations, and various forms of human conflicts, as well as what results from that in terms of kingship, states, and their ranks, and what humans achieve through their actions and efforts in terms of livelihood, knowledge, crafts, and everything that arises from that civilization by its nature. And since falsehood is inherently present in reports and has causes that necessitate it, including biases towards opinions and sects, when the soul is in a state of moderation in accepting news, it gives it its due in scrutiny and consideration until the truth is distinguished from the falsehood. However, if it is influenced by a bias towards an opinion or sect, it accepts what aligns with it from the news at first glance, and that inclination and bias act as a veil over its insight from criticism and scrutiny, leading to the acceptance and transmission of falsehood. Among the causes that lead to falsehood in reports is also the trust in the narrators, and the scrutiny of that trust returns to the evaluation and criticism of them. Additionally, there is forgetfulness about the objectives. Many narrators do not understand the purpose of what they have witnessed or heard and convey the news based on their assumptions and conjectures, which leads to falsehood. There is also the illusion of truth, which is common and often arises from trust in the narrators. Furthermore, ignorance of applying conditions to events due to the confusion and fabrication that may intermingle with them leads the reporter to convey them as they saw them, while they are fabricated and not true in essence. Moreover, people often seek to ingratiate themselves with those of high status and rank through praise and commendation, enhancing their conditions and spreading their reputation, which results in the dissemination of news that is not true. Souls are inclined towards the love of praise, and people are looking towards worldly gains such as status or wealth, and most are not eager for virtues nor competing in them. Another cause that precedes all of the above is ignorance of the natures of conditions in civilization. Every incident, whether in essence or action, must have a specific nature that pertains to it in its essence and the conditions that arise from it. If the listener is knowledgeable about the natures of incidents and conditions in existence and their implications, this assists them in scrutinizing the news to distinguish truth from falsehood. This is more effective in scrutiny than any other means, and it often happens that listeners accept impossible news and transmit it, as Al-Mas'udi reported about Alexander, when the sea creatures prevented him from building Alexandria, and how he made a glass box and dove into the depths of the sea until he depicted those devilish creatures he saw, and made statues of them from metallic bodies, and placed them in front of the building. And those creatures fled when he emerged and saw them. And the building was completed in a long tale of impossible myths due to his making of the glass coffin, and confronting the sea and its waves with his body. And because kings do not subject themselves to such delusions. Whoever among them relied on such a thing has exposed himself to destruction, and the unravelling of the bond and the gathering of people around another, leading to his ruin, and they do not consider his return from such delusion as a fleeting moment. Moreover, it is known that jinn do not have specific forms or statues. They are merely capable of shape-shifting, and what is mentioned about the multitude of heads is intended to convey ugliness and exaggeration, not as a reality. All of this undermines that tale, and the undermining that refutes it from the perspective of existence is clearer than all of this, which is that one immersed in water, even if in a box, would find the air for natural breathing constricted, and his spirit would quickly heat up due to its scarcity, causing him to lose the cool air necessary for the balance of the lungs and the heart's spirit, leading to his demise. This is the reason for the death of those in baths, when the air is cut off from them, and for those hanging in deep wells and pits, when the air becomes foul and is not mixed with winds to stir it. For the one hanging there perishes immediately. This same reason leads to the death of a whale when it leaves the sea, as the air is insufficient to balance its lungs since it is excessively hot, while the water that balances it is cold, and the air it exits into is hot. Thus the hot overwhelms its animal spirit, and it dies instantly. Among the impossible reports is what al-Mas'udi also narrated about the statue of the starling, that in Rome the starlings gather to it on a specific day of the year, carrying olives, from which they make their oil. Look how far this is from the natural course of making oil. There is also what al-Bakri reported about the city called the City of Doors, which encompasses more than 30 stages and contains 10,000 doors, while cities are made for fortification and protection, as will be discussed. This city is beyond being surrounded, thus it cannot have a fortress or a refuge. Al-Mas'udi also reported about the City of Brass, claiming that it is a city entirely made of brass in the desert of Sijil Masa, which Musa ibn Nusayr captured during his expedition to the Maghreb, and that it has closed doors, and whoever ascends its walls and looks over the wall claps and throws himself down, never to return at the end of time, in an impossible tale that is a myth from the narrators. The desert of Sijil Masa has been traversed by travellers and guides, and they have not found any news of this city. Moreover, all the conditions they mentioned about it are impossible and contrary to the natural matters in building cities and their planning, and that metals can only be used for vessels and pottery. As for constructing a city from it, it is, as you see, impossible and distant. There are many such examples, and the scrutiny of them is only through understanding the natures of civilization, which is the best and most reliable way to scrutinize news and distinguish its truth from its falsehood. This scrutiny precedes the evaluation of narrators, and one cannot return to the evaluation of narrators until it is known that the news itself is possible or impossible. If it is impossible, there is no benefit in considering the evaluation and criticism. Indeed, the scholars have counted among the defects in news the impossibility of the meaning of the word and its interpretation in ways that do not conform to reason. The evaluation and criticism are only considered in the validity of religious news because most of it consists of legislative obligations that the legislator has mandated to be acted upon until there is a presumption of their truth, and the way to ensure the truth of that presumption is through trust in the narrators regarding their justice and accuracy. As for news about events, there must be consideration of its conformity for its truth and validity. Thus it is necessary to examine the possibility of its occurrence, making this more important than the evaluation and preceding it, as the benefit of legislation is derived solely from it, and the benefit of news is from it and from the outside through conformity. If that is the case, the law in distinguishing truth from falsehood in news regarding possibility and impossibility is to look at human society, which is civilization, and distinguish what pertains to it from conditions inherent to it and by virtue of its nature, and what is incidental and not to be considered, and what cannot occur. If we do this, it will serve as a law for us in distinguishing truth from falsehood in news and truth from falsehood in a demonstrative manner that leaves no room for doubt. Then, if we hear about any of the conditions occurring in civilization, we will know what to accept and what to reject, and this will serve as a correct standard for historians to seek the path of truth and accuracy in what they convey. This is the aim of this first book of our composition, and it seems that this is an independent science in itself, as it has a subject, which is human civilization and human society, and it has issues, which are the explanation of what pertains to it from incidental conditions and states, one after another. This is the nature of every science, whether it is conventional or rational. Know that the discussion on this subject is a newly established craft, strange in inclination and valuable in benefit, discovered through research and led to by deep exploration. It is not a science of rhetoric, as it is not about persuasive and beneficial statements to sway the public towards an opinion or repel them from it, nor is it a science of civil politics, as civil politics is the management of the household or city according to what is required by ethics and wisdom, to guide the public on a path that preserves the species and its survival. It has diverged from the subject of these two arts that may resemble it, as if it is a newly derived science. Indeed, I have not come across anyone from creation discussing this topic. I do not know if it is due to their negligence regarding it, nor do I suspect them, or perhaps they have written on this subject and exhausted it. But it has not reached us. Many sciences have reached us, such as the sciences of the Persians, which Umar, may God be pleased with him, ordered to be erased upon the conquest, and the sciences of the Chaldeans, Syrians, and the people of Babylon, and what has appeared from their traces and results, and the sciences of the Copts and their predecessors. However, we have only received the sciences of one nation, the Greeks, specifically because Al-Ma'mun ordered their extraction from their language and was able to do so due to the abundance of translators and the funds spent on it. We have not found anything from the sciences of others. If every truth related to nature is suitable for inquiry regarding what incidental conditions may arise from it, it should be considered that every concept and truth is a science that pertains to it. However, the philosophers may have only focused on the concern for fruits, and this is only its fruit in news, as you have seen. Although its issues in themselves and in their specificity are noble, their fruit is the correction of news, which is weak, and for this reason they have abandoned it. And God knows best. And what you have been given of knowledge is but a little. This art that has come to our attention contains issues that arise incidentally for scholars in the proofs of their sciences, and they are of the same kind as its issues in subject and demand, such as what philosophers and scholars mention in proving prophethood, that humans cooperate in their existence and thus need a ruler and a deterrent. Similarly, what is mentioned in the principles of jurisprudence in the section on proving languages, that people need to express their intentions through the nature of cooperation in society, and that clarifying expressions is easier. Also, what jurists mention in justifying legal rulings based on objectives, that adultery corrupts lineage and disrupts the species, and that murder also disrupts the species, and that injustice leads to the destruction of civilization, which in turn leads to the corruption of the species, and other such legal objectives in rulings, as they are all based on the preservation of civilization. Thus, they must consider what may arise from it, which is evident from our discussion in these representative issues. Likewise, we find a few of its issues in scattered words from the philosophers of creation, but they have not exhausted it. From the words of the Mobadan Bahram ibn Bahram in the story of the owls that Al-Masrudi narrated. O King, the king's honor cannot be completed except through the law and obedience to Allah, acting under his command and prohibition. There is no foundation for the law except through the king, and there is no honor for the king except through men, and there is no foundation for men except through wealth, and there is no way for wealth except through civilization, and there is no way for civilization except through justice. Justice is the balance set between creation, established by the Lord, and its custodian is the king. From the words of Anushirvan, in this same context, the king is with the army is with wealth, wealth is with taxes, taxes are with civilization, civilization is with justice, and justice is through the rectification of workers. The head of all is the king's attention to his subjects himself and his ability to discipline them until he governs them and they do not govern him. In the book attributed to Aristotle on politics, which is circulated among people, there is a good portion of it, but it is not exhaustive, nor does it give due rights to proofs, and it is mixed with others. In that book, he refers to these words that we have quoted from the Mobadan and Anushirvan, and places them in a close circle, the essence of which is his statement. The world is a garden, the fence of which is the state. The state is a sultan that sustains the tradition. The tradition is a policy governed by the king. The king is a system supported by the army. The army is helpers, whose sustenance is provided by wealth. Wealth is the livelihood gathered by the subjects. The subjects are servants protected by justice. Justice is familiar, and through it, the world is sustained. The world is a garden. Then it returns to the beginning of the discussion. These are 8 political wisdom statements that are interconnected, and their ends return to their beginnings, forming a circle whose ends cannot be determined. It is a pride to have discovered them, and a great benefit. If you reflect on our words in the section on states and kingship, and give it its due in scrutiny and understanding, you will find within it an explanation of these words, and a detailed clarification of their generalities, thoroughly articulated with the most comprehensive explanation and the clearest evidence and proof that God has revealed to us without the teaching of Aristotle or the benefit of the Mobadan. Likewise, you will find in the words of Ibn al-Muqaddimah and what he elaborates in his letters regarding politics many issues from this book of ours that are not proven as we have proven them. Rather, he presents them in mention in a rhetorical style and the eloquence of speech. Similarly, the judge Abu Bakr al-Turtushi has circled around this in his book, The Lamp of Kings, categorizing it into chapters that approach the chapters of this book of ours and its issues. But he did not hit the mark, nor did he grasp the essence, nor did he exhaust the issues or clarify the proofs. He merely categorizes the chapter for the issue, and then cites many narrations and reports, quoting scattered words from the philosophers of Persia, such as Buzurmer, the Mobadan, and the philosophers of India, and what is narrated from Daniel, Hermes, and others among the greats of creation, without uncovering the truth or raising the natural proofs. It is merely transmission and compilation resembling sermons, as if he circled around the subject without hitting it, nor did he achieve his aim or exhaust his issues. We have been inspired by God to this, and have discovered a science that places us between obscurity and clarity in its news. If I have exhausted its issues and distinguished them from other crafts, it is a success from God and guidance. If I have missed something in its enumeration and confused it with others, it is for the discerning observer to correct it, and I have the merit, for I have paved the way for it and clarified the path. God guides by his light whom he wills. Now we will clarify in this book what occurs to humans in their gatherings regarding the conditions of civilization in kingship, livelihood, knowledge, and crafts, through demonstrative means that clarify the truth in the knowledge of the specific and the general, dispelling illusions and raising doubts. We say that since humans are distinguished from other animals by characteristics unique to them, including knowledge and crafts, which are the results of thought that set them apart from animals, and honor them with a description above all creatures, and the need for a ruling authority and a dominant power, as their existence cannot be without it among all animals, except for what is said about bees and locusts. These, although they have something similar, do so through inspiration, not through thought and deliberation. Additionally, there is the pursuit of livelihood and the effort to obtain it through its means and the acquisition of its causes. As God has made humans dependent on food for their life and survival, guiding them to seek and pursue it, as he said, he gave everything its form, then guided it. Among these is civilization, which is the cohabitation and mutual concession in a city or settlement for the sake of companionship and fulfilling needs, as they are naturally inclined to cooperate for livelihood, as we will explain. Among this civilization is what is nomadic, which occurs in the outskirts, mountains, and settlements in the wilderness and sandy areas, and what is urban, which occurs in cities, towns, and urban areas for the sake of fortification and protection by their walls. In all these conditions, there are matters that arise from the perspective of social gatherings that are inherent to it. Therefore, the discussion in this book is confined to 6 chapters. The first, on human civilization in general, its types, and its share of the earth. The second, on nomadic civilization, and the mention of tribes and savage nations. The third, on states, caliphate, and kingship, mentioning the ranks of sovereignty. The fourth, on urban civilization, cities, and towns. The fifth, on crafts, livelihood, and its means. And the sixth, on knowledge, its acquisition, and learning. I have placed nomadic civilization first because it precedes all of them, as we will explain later, and I have also prioritized kingship over cities and towns. As for prioritizing livelihood, it is because livelihood is a necessary natural requirement, while learning is a luxury or a need, and the natural is prior to the luxury. I have placed crafts with livelihood because they are part of it in some respects, and from the perspective of civilization, as we will explain later. And God is the one who grants success to the truth. The first section, on human civilization in general. First, human interaction is essential. The wise express this by saying that man is a social being by nature, meaning that he must gather, which is the city in their terminology, and this is the meaning of civilization. The explanation is that God Almighty created man and fashioned him in a way that his life and existence cannot be sustained except through nourishment, and he guided him to seek it by his nature and by the abilities instilled in him to obtain it. However, the ability of one individual is insufficient to meet his need for that nourishment which is essential for his life. Even if we assume the least possible, which is a daily ration of wheat, it can only be obtained through much effort in grinding, kneading, and cooking. Each of these three tasks requires tools and implements that can only be produced through various crafts, such as blacksmiths, carpenters, and potters. Even if he were to eat it raw without any processing, he would still need to engage in many other activities, such as farming, harvesting, and threshing, which separates the grain from the husk of the ear. Each of these activities requires multiple tools and many more crafts than the first, and it is impossible for one person to fulfill all of this, or even part of it alone. Therefore, a large number of individuals of his kind must come together to provide sustenance for themselves, and through cooperation, they can meet their needs many times over. Similarly, each of them also needs to rely on others for self-defense, as God Almighty, when he created the instincts in all animals and distributed their abilities, granted many non-human animals greater capabilities than those of humans. For example, the strength of a horse is much greater than that of a human, as is the strength of a donkey, an ox, a lion, and an elephant, which far exceeds human capability. Since aggression is natural in animals, each one has a specific organ to defend itself against the aggression of others. For humans, in place of all this, there is intellect and hands. The hands are prepared for crafts through the service of intellect, and crafts provide them with tools that substitute for the natural defenses found in other animals, such as spears that replace horns, swords that replace claws, and shields that replace tough skins, among other things mentioned by Galen in his book on the benefits of organs. A single human cannot withstand the strength of a single wild animal, especially a predatory one, and he is incapable of defending himself alone. His ability is also insufficient to utilize the tools prepared for defense, so cooperation with his fellow humans is essential. Without this cooperation, he cannot obtain food or nourishment, nor can he sustain his life due to the need for food that God has instilled in him, nor can he defend himself due to the lack of weapons, making him prey for animals and leading to his swift demise, which would extinguish the human race. If cooperation provides him with food for nourishment and weapons for defense, then God's wisdom in preserving his existence and the survival of his kind is fulfilled. Thus, this gathering is necessary for the human species. Otherwise, their existence would not be complete, nor would God's intention of populating the world with them and entrusting it to them be realized. This is the meaning of civilization, which we have made the subject of this science. In this discourse, there is a kind of proof of the subject in its field, which is its designated topic. Although it is not obligatory for the scholar of the field to prove the subject in that science, as it has been established in logical methodology that it is not required for a scholar to prove the subject in that science, it is also not prohibited, making its proof a voluntary act, and God is the granter of success by his grace. Then, when this gathering occurs among humans, as we have established, and the world is populated by them, there must be a restraint to prevent some from harming others due to their animal instincts of aggression and injustice. The weapons that have been made to repel the aggression of wild animals are not sufficient to prevent aggression among humans, as they are available to all. Therefore, there must be something else to prevent the aggression of some against others, and it cannot come from outside them, as all animals lack the understanding and inspirations that humans possess. This restraint must come from one of them who has dominance, authority, and a controlling hand, so that no one can harm another. This is the meaning of kingship. It has become clear to you that humans have a natural characteristic that they cannot do without, and it can be found in some non-human animals, as the wise have mentioned, such as in bees and locusts, where they have been observed to follow a leader distinguished from them in form and body. However, this is present in non-humans by virtue of instinct and guidance, not by virtue of intellect and governance. He gave everything its form, then guided it. Philosophers add to this proof by attempting to establish prophethood through rational evidence, asserting that it is a natural characteristic of humans. They argue that humans must have a restraining authority, and then they say that this authority must be a law imposed by God, brought by one of the humans, and that he must be distinguished from them by the qualities of guidance that God has endowed him with, so that they may submit to him and accept him, allowing the authority to be established among them without denial or falsification. This issue is not demonstrable for the philosophers, as you can see, since the existence and life of humans can continue without it, based on what a ruler imposes on himself or through the tribal loyalty that enables him to dominate them. The people of the scriptures and the followers of the prophets are few compared to the Magians, who have no scripture, as they are the majority of the world's population. Nevertheless, they have had states and legacies, in addition to life. This is also true for them to this day in the deviated regions of the north and south, unlike human life, which is chaotic without any restraint whatsoever. This is impossible, and thus it becomes clear to you their error in the necessity of prophethood, which is not rational, but rather the understanding of the law, as is the belief of the predecessors of the nation. And God is the guardian of success and guidance. Second, the proportion of the population of the earth and a reference to some of what is in it of trees, rivers, and regions. Know that it has been established in the books of the wise who observe the conditions of the world that the shape of the earth is spherical, and that it is surrounded by water as if it were a floating grape, and the water has receded from some of its sides due to God's will to create animals in it, and to populate it with the human species, which has the vicegerency over all others. It may be imagined that the water is beneath the earth, which is not correct. Rather, the natural carving has shaped the earth and the center of its sphere, which is its core, and everything seeks it due to its weight, while the water surrounding it is above the earth. If it is said that something of it is beneath the earth, it is in relation to another direction. As for the land from which the water has receded, it is half of the surface of its sphere, in the shape of a circle surrounded by water from all sides, a sea called the ocean, also referred to as La Blaya, with the second L emphasized, and it is called oceans in foreign names, and it is referred to as the Green and Black Sea. Then, this revealed land for habitation is more desolate and empty than inhabited, and the uninhabited part to the south is greater than that to the north, and the inhabited part is inclined towards the northern side, in a flat spherical shape, ending from the south at the equator, and from the north at a spherical line, behind which are the mountains separating it from the elemental water, which has a barrier of Gog and Magog between them. These mountains are inclined towards the east, and extend from the east and west to the elemental water also by two segments of the surrounding circle. This revealed land is said to be about half of the sphere or less, and the inhabited part is about a quarter, which is divided into 7 regions, and the equator divides the earth into 2 halves from west to east, which is the length of the earth and the largest line in its sphere, just as the zodiacal belt and the circle of the mean day are the largest lines in the heavens. The zodiac is divided into 360 degrees, and the degree of the earth's distance is 25 parasangs, and the parasang is 12,000 cubits, and the cubit is 24 fingers, and the finger is 6 grains of barley arranged closely together. Between the circle of the mean day, which divides the heavens into 2 halves, and the equator of the earth, there are 90 degrees between each of the poles, but the inhabited area in the northern direction from the equator is 64 degrees, and the remaining part is empty, with no habitation, due to extreme cold and stillness, just as the southern direction is entirely empty due to extreme heat, as we will explain all of this, God willing. Then, those who report on this inhabited area and its boundaries, and what it contains of cities, towns, mountains, seas, rivers, deserts, and sands, like Ptolemy in his book of geography, and the author of the book Zakar after him, divided this inhabited area into 7 sections, called the 7 regions, with imaginary boundaries between the east and the west, equal in width but different in length. The first region is longer than the second, and so on until the last, making the 7th the shortest, due to the nature of the circle, resulting from the receding of water from the Earth's sphere. Each of these regions is divided into 10 parts, from west to east in succession, and in each part there is information about its conditions and the conditions of its habitation. They mentioned that this ocean exits from the west in the fourth region, the known Roman Sea, starting in a narrow gulf about 12 miles wide or so between Tangier and Tarifa, called Al-Zukak. Then it goes eastward and expands to a width of 600 miles, ending in the last part of the fourth region at a distance of 1,000 parasangs and 160 parasangs from its origin. There are the coasts of Syria on it, and on the southern side, the coasts of Morocco, the first of which is Tangier at the Gulf, then Africa, then Barca to Alexandria. On the northern side are the coasts of Constantinople at the Gulf, then the Venetians, then Rome, then the Franks, then Andalusia, to Tarifa at the Gulf opposite Tangier. This sea is called the Roman and Syrian Sea, and it contains many large inhabited islands like Crete, Cyprus, Sicily, Majorca, and Sardinia. They said, and from this sea, two other seas emerge from two gulfs. One is parallel to Constantinople, starting from this sea, narrow in width, and passes through three seas, connecting to Constantinople, then expands to a width of 4 miles, and flows for 60 miles, called the Gulf of Constantinople. Then it exits from an opening 6 miles wide, extending into the Sea of Nice, which diverts from there towards the east, passing through the land of Heraclea and ending in the land of the Khazars, about 1,300 miles from its opening, with nations of Romans, Turks, Persians, and Russians on both sides. The second sea from the gulfs of this Roman Sea is the Venetian Sea, which emerges from the land of the Romans towards the north. When it reaches the mountain, it diverts towards the west to the land of the Venetians, ending in the land of England, about 1,100 miles from its origin, with nations of Venetians, Romans, and others on its shores, and it is called the Gulf of the Venetians. They said that from this ocean there also flows from the east, at 13 degrees north of the equator, a vast sea that extends slightly south until it reaches the first region, then flows westward until it reaches the fifth part of it, to the lands of Ethiopia, the Zanj, and the land of Bab al-Mandab, about 4,000 parasangs from its origin, and it is called the Chinese, Indian, and Ethiopian Sea. On its southern side are the lands of the Zanj and the Berbers, mentioned by Imru al-Qais in his poetry, and they are not the Berbers who are tribes of Morocco. Then the land of Mogadishu, then the land of Safala, and the land of Wakwak, and other nations, with nothing after them but deserts and emptiness. On its northern side are China from its origin, then India, then Sind, then the coasts of Yemen from the Akaf, Zabid, and others, then the lands of the Zanj at its end, and after them, Ethiopia. They said that from this Ethiopian sea, two other seas emerge, one of which exits from its end at Bab al-Mandab, starting narrow, then flows wide towards the north and slightly west, until it reaches the Kulzum in the fifth part of the second region, about 1,400 miles from its origin, and it is called the Sea of Kulzum and the Sea of Suez. And between it and the camp of Egypt, from there are 3 stages. On its eastern side are the coasts of Yemen, then Hijaz, Jeddah, then Midian, and Ayla, and Paran at its end. On its western side are the coasts of Upper Egypt, Iyadab, Sawakin, Zayla, then the land of Ethiopia at its origin, and its end at Kulzum is parallel to the Roman Sea at Al-Arish, with about 6 stages between them. Kings in Islam and before it have sought to breach the gap between them, but this has not been accomplished. The second sea from this Ethiopian sea is called the Green Gulf, which emerges between the lands of Sind and the Ahkaf of Yemen, flowing northward slightly west until it reaches Al-Abla from the coast of Basra in the 6th part of the second region, about 440 parasangs from its origin, and it is called the Sea of Persia. On its eastern side are the coasts of Sind, Makran, Kerman, Persia, and Al-Abla, and at its western end are the coasts of Bahrain, Yamama, Oman, Ash-Shah, and the Ahkaf at its origin. Between the Sea of Persia and Kulzum, the Arabian Peninsula seems to be entering from the land into the sea, surrounded by the Ethiopian Sea from the south, the Sea of Kulzum from the west, and the Sea of Persia from the east, leading to Iraq between Syria and Basra, about 1,500 miles between them, where Kufa, Al-Qadisiyah, Baghdad, the Iwan of Khosrow, and Al-Hira are located, and beyond that are the nations of the Persians, Turks, Khazars, and others. In the Arabian Peninsula, the lands of Hijaz are to the west, and the lands of Yamama, Bahrain, and Oman are to the east, and the lands of Yemen are to the south, with its coasts on the Ethiopian Sea. They said that in this inhabited area there is another sea isolated from all other seas in the northern part of the land of the Dailam, called the Sea of Jirjan and Tabaristan, about 1,000 miles long and 600 miles wide, with Azerbaijan and Dailam to its west, the land of the Turks, and Khwarezm to its east, Tabaristan to its south, and the land of the Khazars and the Lan to its north. This is a summary of the famous seas mentioned by the geographers. They said that in this inhabited part there are many rivers, the largest of which are 4 rivers, the Nile, the Euphrates, the Tigris, and the river Balkh, called Gihon. As for the Nile, its source is from a great mountain behind the equator, 16 degrees to the north, in the direction of the 4th part of the first region, called the Mountain of the Moon, and no mountain on earth is higher than it. Many springs emerge from it, some flowing into a lake there and some into another. Then rivers flow from the 2 lakes, all pouring into one lake at the equator, about 10 stages from the mountain. From this lake, 2 rivers emerge, one going northward in its direction, passing through the land of Nubia, then the land of Egypt. When it surpasses it, it branches into closely spaced channels, each called a gulf, and all flow into the Roman Sea at Alexandria, known as the Nile of Egypt, with the Upper Egypt on its eastern side and the oases on its western side. The other river bends towards the west, then flows in its direction until it pours into the ocean, which is the river of Sudan, and all its nations are on its banks. As for the Euphrates, its source is from the land of Armenia, in the 6th part of the 5th region, flowing southward through the land of the Romans and Malatya to Manbij, then passing through Safin, then Raqqa, then Kufa, until it reaches the flat land between Basra and Wasit, from where it pours into the Ethiopian Sea, receiving many rivers along its way, and it has other rivers flowing into the Tigris. As for the Tigris, its source is a spring in the land of Kilat from Armenia as well, flowing southward through Mosul, Azerbaijan, and Baghdad to Wasit, then branching into channels that all pour into the Lake of Basra, leading to the Sea of Persia, which is to the east of the Euphrates, receiving many great rivers from every side. Between the Euphrates and the Tigris, at the beginning, is the island of Mosul, opposite Syria from both banks of the Euphrates and opposite Azerbaijan from the bank of the Tigris. As for the river Gihon, its source is from Balkh in the 8th part of the 3rd region, from many springs there, receiving great rivers, flowing from south to north, passing through the land of Khorasan, then exiting to the land of Khwarezm in the 8th part of the 5th region, pouring into the lake of Jirjania, which is at the foot of its city, a month's journey in its like, and to it flows the river of Fergana and the Shash, coming from the land of the Turks. To the west of the river Gihon are the lands of Khorasan and Khwarezm, and to its east are the lands of Bukhara, Termez, and Samarkand, and from there to beyond are the lands of the Turks, Fergana, and the Khazars, and all of this has been mentioned by Ptolemy in his book and Al-Sharif in his book Rojar, and they depicted in geography all that is in the inhabited area from mountains, seas, and valleys, and they covered from that what we do not need due to its length, and because our concern is mostly with the west, which is the homeland of the Berbers, and the lands of the Arabs from the east. God is the granter of success. Third, on the moderate regions and the deviated ones, and the effect of air on the colours of humans and many of their conditions. We have shown that the inhabited part of this exposed land is its centre due to the excessive heat in the south and the cold in the north. Since the 2 sides, north and south, are opposed in heat and cold, it is necessary for the quality to gradually transition from both extremes to the centre, making it moderate. Thus, the 4th region is the most moderate in terms of habitation, while those bordering the 3rd and 5th are closer to moderation, and the 2nd and 6th are far from moderation, with the 1st and 7th being much further away. For this reason, the sciences, crafts, buildings, clothing, food, fruits, and even animals, as well as everything that forms in these three moderate regions, are characterized by moderation. Their human inhabitants have the most balanced bodies, colors, morals, and religions, even prophecies, which are mostly found there. We have not encountered any reports of prophethood in the southern or northern regions, as prophets and messengers are chosen from the most complete of the species in their creation and morals. God Almighty said, "You are the best nation ever raised for mankind." This is so that acceptance is complete for what the prophets bring from God. The people of these regions are more complete due to the presence of moderation, and you find them at the height of moderation in their homes, clothing, food, and crafts, constructing houses made of well-crafted stone, and excelling in the quality of tools and utensils, striving for excellence in that. They possess natural minerals such as gold, silver, iron, copper, lead, and tin, and they conduct their transactions using the two precious currencies, avoiding deviation in their general conditions. These are the people of the Maghreb, the Levant, Hijaz, Yemen, the two Iraqs, India, Sindh, China, as well as Andalusia, and those nearby from the Franks, the Jalaka, the Romans, the Greeks, and those who are with them or close to them in these moderate regions. For this reason, Iraq and the Levant are the most moderate of all, as they are central from all directions. As for the regions far from moderation, such as the 1st, 2nd, 6th, and 7th, their inhabitants are further from moderation in all their conditions. Their buildings are made of clay and reeds, their food consists of corn and grass, and their clothing is made from tree leaves that they weave or from animal skins, with most of them being naked. Their conditions in religion are also such that they do not recognize prophethood, nor adhere to a law, except for those who are close to them from the sides of moderation, which is rare, like the Abyssinians neighboring Yemen, who adhered to Christianity before and after Islam until this time, and like the people of Mali, Kuku, and Takrur neighboring the land of the Maghreb, who are said to have embraced Islam in the 7th century, and like those who adhered to Christianity from the nations of the Slavs, Franks, and Turks from the north. As for those outside of these, from the inhabitants of those deviating regions to the south and north, religion is unknown to them, and knowledge is lost among them, with all their conditions being far from those of humans and close to those of beasts. And he creates what you do not know. One might object to this statement by citing Yemen, Hadramaut, the Akaf, and the lands of Hijaz, Yamama, and what lies beyond them in the Arabian Peninsula in the 1st and 2nd regions. However, the entire Arabian Peninsula is surrounded by seas on 3 sides, as we mentioned, so its humidity has an effect on the moisture of its air, reducing the dryness and deviation that the heat would necessitate, resulting in some moderation due to the sea's humidity. Some genealogists, lacking knowledge of the natures of beings, have imagined that the Sudanese are the descendants of Ham, son of Noah, who were distinguished by the color black due to a curse from their father that manifested in their color and in what God decreed regarding slavery in their lineage. They convey a tale from the fables of storytellers and a curse of Noah upon his son Ham that appears in the Torah, which does not mention blackness, but rather that he prayed for his descendants to be servants to the children of his brothers, nothing more. The claim of attributing blackness to Ham is a neglect of the nature of heat and cold, and their effects on the air and the animals that form therein. This color encompasses the inhabitants of the 1st and 2nd regions, due to the temperament of their air from the excessive heat in the south, as the sun is directly overhead twice a year, with one of those times being close to the other, leading to prolonged direct sunlight throughout the seasons, increasing the light for that reason, and the intense heat affects them, causing their skins to darken due to the excessive heat. The counterpart of these 2 regions in the north is the 7th and 6th regions, whose inhabitants also exhibit whiteness due to the temperament of their air from the extreme cold in the north, as the sun remains at their horizon, in the visible circle or close to it, not rising to the overhead position or near it, weakening the heat and intensifying the cold throughout the seasons, causing the colors of their people to whiten and leading to the characteristics that result from the temperament of extreme cold, such as blue eyes, rough skin, and coarse hair. The 3 regions in between, the 5th, fourth, and third have a significant share in moderation, with the fourth being the most moderate, as we have previously mentioned. Thus, its people possess moderation in their creation and morals, which is dictated by the temperament of their heir, followed by the third and fifth regions, even if they do not reach the ultimate moderation, as this one leans slightly towards the hot south, and that one slightly towards the cold north, yet they do not deviate significantly. The four regions are inclined, and their inhabitants are likewise in their creation and morals. The first and second due to heat and blackness, and the seventh due to cold and whiteness. The inhabitants of the south from the first and second regions are referred to as Abyssinians, Zanj, and Sudan, names synonymous with the nations that have changed due to blackness, although the name Abyssinians is specifically used for those facing Mecca and Yemen, while Zanj refers to those facing the Indian Ocean. These names do not arise from their descent from a black human, whether Ham or anyone else. We can find among the Sudanese in the south those who inhabit the moderate quarter, or the seventh, inclined towards whiteness, whose descendants gradually whiten over time, and conversely, those from the north or the fourth in the south, whose descendants gradually darken. This indicates that colour is dependent on the temperament of the heir. Ibn Sina stated in his poem on medicine, "The Zanj have a heat that is not in bodies, until their skins are clothed in blackness, and the Slavs have acquired whiteness, until their skins have become white." As for the people of the north, they are not named based on their colours, because whiteness was a colour for the people of that language that established names, so there was no strangeness that would necessitate considering it in naming, due to its agreement and familiarity. We have found their inhabitants among the Turks, Slavs, Tokhuzgus, Khazars, Lan, and many of the Franks, and Gog and Magog, names scattered, and multiple generations named with diverse names. As for the inhabitants of the three moderate regions, they are characterized by moderation in their creation, conduct, and all natural conditions for habitation, including livelihood, homes, crafts, sciences, leadership, and kingship. Prophethood, kingship, states, laws, sciences, cities, buildings, insight, superior crafts, and all moderate conditions were found among them. The people of these regions, whose news we have encountered, include the Arabs, Romans, Persians, Israelites, Greeks, and the people of Sind, India, and China. When genealogists observed the differences among these nations in their characteristics and symbols, they assumed that this was due to lineage, so they categorized all the people of the south as Sudanese from the descendants of Ham and doubted their colors, fabricating that weak tale and categorizing most of the people of the north as descendants of Japheth. Most of the moderate nations and the people of the center who claim sciences, crafts, religions, laws, politics, and kingship are from the descendants of Shem. This claim, although it may coincide with the truth in attributing these, is not a consistent measure. It is merely a report of reality, not that the naming of the people of the south as Sudanese and Abyssinians is due to their descent from the Black Ham. What led them to this error is their belief that the distinction between nations occurs only through lineage, which is not the case. The distinction of a generation or nation can be by lineage in some, as with the Arabs, Israelites, and Persians, and by direction and characteristic, as with the Zanj, Abyssinians, Slavs, and Sudanese, and by customs, symbols, and lineage, as with the Arabs. It can also be through other conditions of nations, their characteristics, and their distinguishing features. Thus, generalizing the statement about the people of a specific region, whether south or north, as being from the descendants of a known figure, due to the traits or colors or characteristics associated with that ancestor, is one of the misconceptions that arise from ignorance of the natures of beings and regions. All of these can change in descendants, and it is not necessary for them to remain as a decree of Allah upon His servants. You will not find any change in the decree of Allah. Allah and His Messenger know best of the unseen, and are the most wise, the most gracious, the most merciful. Fourth, on the effect of air on human morals. We have seen that the nature of the Sudanese people, in general, is characterized by lightness, recklessness, and a love for music, as they are often found dancing to every rhythm, described as foolish in every region. The correct reason for this is that it has been established in its place in wisdom that the nature of joy and happiness is the spread of the vital spirit and its proliferation, while the nature of sadness is the opposite, which is its contraction and densification. It has been established that heat spreads air and vapor, increasing its quantity. Hence, the ecstatic person experiences joy and happiness that cannot be expressed, due to the vapor of the spirit entering the heart from the vital heat that the wine's intensity sends into the spirit from its temperament, causing the spirit to spread and bringing about the nature of joy. Similarly, we find those who indulge in baths, when they breathe in its air and the heat of the air connects with their spirits, causing them to warm up, which leads to joy, and many of them may burst into song arising from happiness. Since the Sudanese live in a hot region, and heat dominates their temperaments, and in the essence of their composition, there is heat in their spirits, proportional to their bodies and their region, their spirits, in comparison to the spirits of the people of the fourth region, are hotter, thus more expansive, quicker to joy and happiness, and more open, leading to recklessness as a consequence of this. Likewise, the inhabitants of the coastal regions are somewhat similar, as their air is doubly hot due to the reflections from the sea's simple lights and rays, so their share of the effects of heat in joy and lightness is greater than that of the hilly and cold mountain regions. We may find a little of this among the people of the island regions of the third region, due to the abundance of heat in it and its air, as it is deeply rooted in the south from the rural areas and hills. Consider also the people of Egypt, as it is similar in breadth to the island regions or close to it, how joy and lightness have prevailed over them, and how they are oblivious to the consequences, to the extent that they do not save provisions for their year or month, and most of their food comes from their markets. Conversely, since Fez is in the Maghreb, which is deeper into the cold hills, you see its people bowed down in sadness, and how they excessively consider the consequences, to the extent that a man among them may save provisions for 2 years of wheat and rush to the markets to buy his daily sustenance, fearing that he may lose something from his reserves. Following this in the regions and countries, you find in morals an effect from the qualities of the air, and God, the Creator, is all-knowing. Al-Mas'udi has addressed the inquiry into the reason for the lightness of the Sudanese and their recklessness and love for music, and he attempted to explain it but came up with nothing more than a transmission from Galen and Jacob ibn Isaac al-Kindi that it is due to the weakness of their brains and the resulting weakness of their minds. This is a statement without substance or proof, and God guides whom he wills to a straight path. Fifth, on the differences in the conditions of civilization in times of abundance and famine, and the effects that arise from that on the bodies and morals of humans. Know that not all of these temperate regions are fertile, nor are all their inhabitants living in abundance. Rather, there are those among them who experience a richness of life from grains, meat, wheat, and fruits, due to the fertility of the soil, the moderation of the climate, and the abundance of civilization. There are also barren lands that do not yield crops or grass at all, so their inhabitants live in hardship, like the people of Hijaz and southern Yemen, and like the veiled ones from the Sanhaja living in the Moroccan desert and the edges of the sands between the Berbers and the Sudanese. These people lack grains and meat altogether. Their sustenance and provisions come from milk and meat. Similarly, the Arabs wandering in the wilderness, although they occasionally obtain grains and meat from the hills, do so only at times and under the burden of their protectors, and in limited amounts due to their scarcity, so they cannot satisfy their needs, let alone enjoy abundance and fertility. You will find that they mostly rely on milk, and they compensate for wheat with the best alternatives. Despite this, those lacking grains and meat from the wilderness are in better physical condition and character than those from the hills who are immersed in abundance. Their colors are purer, their bodies cleaner, their shapes more complete and beautiful, their morals more upright, and their minds sharper in knowledge and understanding. This is a fact confirmed by experience in every generation among them. There is much difference between the Arabs and the Berbers, as we have described, and between the veiled ones and the hill dwellers, which can be recognized from their experiences. The reason for this, and God knows best, is that the abundance of food and the many corrupt mixtures and their moistures generate in the body bad waste that leads to after effects that are disproportionate, resulting in dull colors and ugly shapes due to excess flesh, as we have said. The moistures cover the minds and thoughts with the bad vapors that rise to the brain, leading to dullness, negligence, and deviation from moderation in general. Consider this in the animals of the wilderness and the barren lands, such as the gazelle, ostrich, oryx, giraffe, and wild donkeys, and cattle, compared to similar animals from the hills, plains, and fertile pastures. You will find a significant difference in the clarity of their skin, the beauty of their appearance, the proportion of their limbs, and the sharpness of their senses. The gazelle is akin to the goat, the giraffe to the camel, the donkey to the cow, and the difference between them is as you have seen. This is only because the fertility in the hills acts on these bodies with bad waste and corrupt mixtures that show their effects, while hunger. In the wilderness, animals enhances their creation and shapes as desired. Consider this also in humans. We find that the inhabitants of fertile regions with abundant crops, milk, meat, and fruits are often characterized by dullness in their minds and coarseness in their bodies. This is the case with the Berbers immersed in meat and wheat, along with those who are frugal in their living, limited to barley or corn, like the people of the Samada, the people of Gomara, and the Sioux. You will find these in better condition in their minds and bodies, as well as the people of Morocco in general, who are immersed in meat and grain, compared to the people of Andalusia, who lack fat in their land, and whose main sustenance is corn. You will find that the people of Andalusia possess a sharpness of mind, lightness of body, and receptiveness to learning that is not found in others. Likewise, the inhabitants of the outskirts of Morocco in general, along with the urban and city dwellers, for although the cities are abundant like them in meat and fertile in living, their use of it, after cooking and refining it with mixtures, reduces its thickness and lightens its consistency. Most of their meals consist of lamb and chicken, and they do not covet fat from among the meats due to its triviality. Thus, the moistures in their food decrease, and the bad waste they produce in their bodies is less, which is why you find the bodies of city dwellers to be more delicate than those of the rural dwellers, who are hardened by their living conditions. Likewise, you will find those accustomed to hunger among the rural dwellers do not have coarse or fine waste in their bodies. Know that the effect of this fertility on the body and its conditions appears even in matters of religion and worship. We find that those who are frugal among the rural or urban dwellers, who take themselves to hunger and abstain from pleasures, are better in their religion and more devoted to worship than those who live in luxury and abundance. In fact, we find that the religious are few in cities and towns, due to the harshness and negligence that comes with the excess of meats and fats and the core of grain. The presence of worshippers and ascetics is therefore specific to those who are frugal in their diet from the rural areas. Likewise, we find that those who are enriched in living and immersed in its delights from the rural and urban areas, when years of famine strike them, and they are afflicted by hunger, perish more quickly than others, like the Berbers of Morocco and the people of the city of Fez and Egypt, as far as we know, unlike the Arabs of the wilderness and desert, or the people of the date palm lands, whose main sustenance is dates, or the people of Africa at this time, whose main sustenance is barley and oil, and the people of Andalusia, whose main sustenance is corn and oil. For these, even when famine and hunger strike them, do not suffer as much as those others, nor do they perish in large numbers from hunger, nor is it uncommon. The reason for this, and God knows best, is that those immersed in abundance, accustomed to meat and fat, especially, acquire from that an excess moisture in their intestines beyond their original temperamental moisture until it exceeds its limit. When they are faced with a change in habit, due to a lack of food and the absence of meat, and they are forced to consume coarse, unfamiliar food, their intestines quickly become dry and contracted, which is extremely weak, leading to illness and sudden death, because it is from the causes of death. Thus, those who perish in famines are killed by their habitual excess, not by the subsequent hunger. As for those accustomed to a lack of meat and fat, their original moisture remains at its limit without increase, and they are receptive to all natural foods. Therefore, they do not experience dryness or deviation when their food changes, and they generally escape the death that befalls others due to abundance and excess meat in their meals. The essence of all this is that you should know that food and its combinations or abstentions are a matter of habit. Whoever has accustomed himself to a certain food and finds it agreeable to consume becomes familiar with it, and deviating from it or changing it becomes a disease unless it deviates from the purpose of food in general, like poisons and toxins, and what excessively deviates. However, what is found to be nourishing and suitable becomes familiar food through habit. If a person takes to consuming milk and vegetables instead of wheat until it becomes a habit, he has acquired that as food and has become independent of wheat and grains without a doubt. Likewise, whoever has accustomed himself to endure hunger and abstain from food, as is reported about the people of asceticism, we hear strange accounts about them that would be hard to believe for those who do not know them. The reason for this is habit. For when the soul becomes accustomed to something, it becomes part of its nature and character, as it is very adaptable. If it gradually acquires the habit of hunger through training and exercise, it has established a natural habit. What physicians imagine about hunger being fatal is not as they think, except when the soul is forced into it suddenly and deprived of food entirely. At that point, the intestines become blocked, and illness occurs, which may lead to death. However, if that amount is reduced gradually and exercised through a gradual decrease in food, as ascetics do, it is far from leading to death. This gradual process is necessary even in returning from this exercise, for if one returns to the original food suddenly, there is a fear of death. Rather, one should return as he began in the exercise gradually. We have indeed witnessed someone who endured hunger for 40 days and more. Our elders were present in the council of Sultan Abu al-Hassan when 2 women from the Green Island and Ronda were brought to him, who had completely abstained from eating for years. Their matter became well known, and they were tested, and their condition was confirmed until they died. We have also seen many of our companions who subsist on the milk of a goat, sucking its udder at some point during the day or at iftar, and that is their food, and they have continued this for 15 years, and many others, and this is not considered strange. Know that hunger is more beneficial for the body than excessive food in every way, for those who can endure it or reduce it. It has an effect on bodies and minds in terms of their clarity and well-being, as we have said. Consider this with the effects of the foods that result in bodies. We have seen those who are nourished by the flesh of large, magnificent animals produce generations that are likewise. This is observed among the rural and urban dwellers. Likewise, those nourished by the milk and meat of camels also exhibit effects on their morals, such as patience, endurance, and the ability to carry burdens, which is evident in camels. Their intestines also develop in proportion to camel intestines in health and thickness, so they do not suffer from weakness, nor do they experience the effects of food that others do. They consume toxins to relieve their stomachs without being hindered, such as colocynth before cooking, and dracunculus, and they suffer no harm from it. If the delicate intestines of urban dwellers, which have developed on light foods, were to consume it, death would come to them faster than the blink of an eye due to its toxicity. The effects of food on bodies are as mentioned by those in agriculture and observed by those with experience, that when chickens are fed grains cooked in camel dung and their eggs are incubated, the resulting chickens are the largest possible. They may even be able to do without feeding them and cooking the grains by simply placing that dung with the incubated eggs, resulting in chickens of great size. There are many such examples. Therefore, when we see these effects of food on bodies, there is no doubt that hunger also has effects on bodies, as opposites have a similar effect in their influence and lack thereof. The effect of hunger is in purifying the bodies from corrupt excesses and mixed moistures that disrupt the body and mind, just as food has an effect on the existence of that body, and God encompasses all knowledge. Sixth, on the types of beings perceived by humans, either by nature or through practice, preceded by a discussion on revelation and vision. Know that God, the Exalted, has chosen certain individuals from among humanity, favoring them with his speech and creating them with an innate knowledge of him. He made them intermediaries between him and his servants, guiding them to their interests, urging them towards their guidance, protecting them from the fire, and showing them the path to salvation. Among what he imparts to them in knowledge and reveals through their tongues are the miracles and the news of the unseen events that humans cannot know except through God by their means, and they do not know them except by God teaching them. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "Indeed, I only know what Allah has taught me, and know that their news in this regard is characterized by truthfulness, as will become clear to you when you understand the reality of prophethood." One sign of this category of people is that they experience a state of absence during revelation, as if they are in a trance, akin to fainting in the sight of others, while in reality it is a deep engagement with the spiritual angel, perceiving what is beyond human comprehension. Then it descends to human understanding, either through hearing a sound of speech that they comprehend, or by the angel appearing to them in the form of a person who speaks to them with what has been revealed from God. Then that state lifts, and they retain what has been conveyed to them. The Prophet, peace be upon him, was asked about revelation, and he said, "Sometimes it comes to me like the ringing of a bell, which is the hardest upon me, and then it leaves me, and I have understood what was said. Sometimes the angel appears to me as a man and speaks to me, and I comprehend what he says." During this, he experiences a severity and a state that cannot be expressed. In the Hadith, it was mentioned that he faced great difficulty during revelation. Aisha said that revelation would descend upon him on a very cold day, and when it left him, his forehead would be dripping with sweat. God, the Exalted, said, "Indeed, we will cast upon you a heavy word." For this reason, the polytheists would accuse the prophets of madness, saying he was possessed or followed by jinn, as they were misled by what they observed of those states. And whomsoever God misguides, for him there is no guide. Another sign of them is that they possess innate goodness and purity, avoiding all that is blameworthy and impure. This is the meaning of infallibility, as if they are created to be free from blameworthy actions and to be averse to them, as if they are contrary to their nature. It is authentically reported that he carried stones as a boy with his uncle Abbas to build the Kaaba, and he placed them in his garment, but he fell unconscious until he was covered by his garment. He was invited to a gathering where there was a wedding and entertainment, but he fell asleep until the sun rose and did not attend any of their affairs, for God kept him free from all of that. Even in his nature, he refrained from forbidden foods. He would not approach onions and garlic. When asked about this, he said, "I converse with one whom you do not converse with." And when the Prophet, peace be upon him, informed Khadijah, may God be pleased with her, about the state of revelation when it first came to him, and she wanted to test him, she said, "Place me between you and your garment." When he did that, he became absent, and she said, "It is an angel, not a devil," meaning that he does not approach women. She also asked him about his favorite clothing, and he said white and green. She said, "It is an angel," meaning that white and green are colors of goodness, while black is a color of evil and devils, and similar things. Another sign of them is their call to religion and worship, such as prayer, charity, and chastity. Khadijah deduced his truthfulness from this, as did Abu Bakr, and they did not need any evidence outside of his character and conduct. It is authentically reported that when Heraclius received the letter from the Prophet, peace be upon him, inviting him to Islam, he summoned those from Quraysh in his land, including Abu Sufyan, to ask them about him. Among the questions he asked was, "What does he command you?" Abu Sufyan replied, "Prayer, charity, maintaining family ties, and chastity," and so on. Heraclius responded, "If what you say is true, he is a prophet, and will possess what is under my feet." The chastity that Heraclius referred to is infallibility. Observe how he took infallibility and the call to religion and worship as evidence of the truth of his prophethood, without needing a miracle, indicating that this is one of the signs of prophethood. Another sign of them is that they belong to a noble lineage among their people. It is authentically reported that God did not send a prophet except from a position of strength among his people. In another narration, it is stated that he was sent from a wealthy background among his people, as noted by Al-Hakim in his correction of the two Sahihs. In Heraclius's inquiry to Abu Sufyan, as recorded in the Sahih, he asked, "How is he among you?" Abu Sufyan replied, "He is of noble lineage among us." Heraclius said, "And the messengers are sent from the noble lineages of their people," meaning that he should have a support and strength that protects him from the harm of the disbelievers until he conveys the message of his Lord and fulfills God's will in completing his religion and faith. Another sign of them is the occurrence of miracles that testify to their truthfulness, which are actions that humans cannot replicate. They are called miracles because they are not within the capacity of servants and occur outside the realm of their ability. There is a difference among people regarding how they occur and their indication of the prophet's truthfulness. The theologians, based on the view of the chosen agent, assert that they occur by God's power, not by the prophet's action. Although the actions of servants, according to the Mu'tazila, are attributed to them, miracles are not of the same nature as their actions. The prophet has no role in them, except to challenge with them by God's permission, which means that the prophet, peace be upon him, would use them as evidence of his truthfulness in his claim before they occurred. Once they happen, they are regarded as a clear statement from God that he is truthful, and their indication of truthfulness is then definitive. The miracle is characterized by the combination of the extraordinary and the challenge, which is why the challenge is part of it. The theologians describe it as a characteristic of itself, which is one because it is a self-evident meaning for them. The challenge is what distinguishes it from honor and magic, as there is no need for them to provide proof. There is no existence of the challenge unless it occurs by coincidence. If the challenge occurs in honor for those who permit it, and it has an indication, it is only for the guardianship, which is different from prophethood. Hence, Abu Ishaq and others prohibited the occurrence of miracles as a means to avoid confusion with prophethood when challenging with guardianship. We have shown you the distinction between them, and he challenges with something different from what the prophet challenges with, so there is no confusion. The transmission from the teacher in this regard is not explicit, and may be interpreted as a denial of the occurrence of miracles for the prophets, based on the exclusivity of each group to its own miracles. As for the Mu'tazila, they deny the occurrence of honor, because miracles are not actions of servants, and their actions are habitual, so there is no difference. The occurrence of miracles at the hands of a liar is impossible. As for the Ash'ari, it is because the essence of the miracle is truthfulness and guidance. If it occurs otherwise, the evidence becomes a suspicion, guidance becomes misguidance, and truthfulness becomes falsehood, and the realities become impossible, and the attributes of the essence are inverted. What must be assumed to occur is impossible. As for the Mu'tazila, the occurrence of evidence as a suspicion and guidance as misguidance is ugly, so it does not occur from God. As for the philosophers, the extraordinary is an action of the prophet, even if it is outside the realm of ability, based on their doctrine of necessary existence and the occurrence of events being contingent upon causes and conditions, ultimately relying on the necessary agent, not by choice. The prophetic soul, according to them, has inherent qualities, including the issuance of these miracles by its power and the obedience of the elements to it in creation. The prophet, according to them, is endowed with the ability to manipulate the universe as he directs it, supported by what God has granted him in that regard. The extraordinary occurs for the prophet, whether for the purpose of challenge or not, and it is a testimony to his truthfulness in terms of its indication of the prophet's manipulation of the universe, which is one of the qualities of the prophetic soul, not that it is equivalent to a clear statement of truthfulness. Therefore, its indication is not definitive as it is for the theologians, and the challenge is not a part of the miracle. It has not been established as a distinction from magic and honor. The distinction from magic is that the prophet is created for good actions and is diverted from evil actions, so evil does not touch his miracles, while the magician is the opposite. All his actions are evil and aimed at evil purposes. The distinction from honor is that the miracles of the prophet are specific, such as ascending to the heavens, penetrating dense bodies, reviving the dead, conversing with angels, and flying in the air, while the miracles of the saint are lesser, such as increasing the little and speaking about some future events, and similar things that are inferior to the actions of the prophets. The prophet brings all his miracles, and he cannot replicate the miracles of the prophets. The mystics have established this in their writings and have taught it from those who informed them. Once this is established, know that the greatest, most honorable and clearest miracle is the noble Quran revealed to our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. For the miracles generally occur in contrast to the revelation that the Prophet receives, and the miracle comes as evidence of his truthfulness, while the Quran is itself the claimed revelation and the miraculous extraordinary. Its evidence is in itself and does not require a different proof like other miracles alongside revelation. It is the clearest evidence due to the unity of the proof and the indicated meaning within it. This is the meaning of the Prophet's statement, "There is no prophet among the prophets except that he was given signs that made people believe in him. And what I have been given is a revelation that has been revealed to me. And I hope to have the most followers on the day of resurrection," indicating that when the miracle is of such clarity and strength of indication, being the revelation itself, its truthfulness is more evident due to its clarity, leading to a greater number of believers and followers. And now let us mention the interpretation of the reality of prophethood as explained by many researchers. Then we will mention the reality of divination, then dreams, then the state of soothsayers, and other aspects of the unseen. We say, know that God has guided us and you, that we observe this world with all its creatures in a state of arrangement and precision, linking causes with their effects, the connection of worlds with one another, and the transformation of some existences into others, with wonders that never cease and goals that never end. I begin with the tangible corporeal world, and first the world of observable elements, how it ascends from the earth to water, then to air, and then to fire, with each one connected to the other, and each one prepared to transform into what follows, ascending and descending, and sometimes transforming, with the ascending being more subtle than what preceded it until it reaches the world of celestial spheres, which is the subtlest of all, in layers connected to one another in a manner that can only be perceived through movement, and by it some are guided to know their measures and positions, and what follows from the existence of entities that have these effects within them. Then look at the world of creation, how it began with minerals, then plants, then animals, in a wondrous manner of progression, the last horizon of minerals connected to the first horizon of plants, like grasses and those without seeds, and the last horizon of plants, like palm trees and vines, connected to the first horizon of animals, like snails and shells, which have only the power of touch. The meaning of connection in these components is that the last horizon of one is prepared with a strange readiness to become the first horizon of what follows. The world of animals expanded, its types multiplied, and it culminated in the progression of creation to humans, the possessors of thought and contemplation, who rise to the world of power, where sensation and perception are united, and it has not yet reached contemplation and thought in action, and this was the first horizon of humanity after it. This is the limit of our witnessing. Then we find in the worlds, with their differences, various effects. In the world of sensation, there are effects from the movements of celestial spheres and elements, and in the world of creation, there are effects from the movement of growth and perception, all of which testify that they have an influencer distinct from bodies. It is spiritual, and connects with the components due to the existence of this world in their existence. Therefore, it is the perceiving and moving soul, and there must be another existence above it that grants it the powers of perception and movement, which also connects with it, and its essence is pure perception and pure understanding, which is the world of angels. Thus, it is necessary for the soul to have the readiness to detach from humanity to royalty, to become in action from the genus of angels at times, in a moment of moments, and that is after it completes its spiritual essence in action, as we will mention later, and it has a connection to the horizon that follows it, the state of the arranged existences, as we have presented. It has in connection two directions, upward and downward, and it is connected to the body from below, acquiring through it the sensory perceptions that prepare it to obtain understanding in action, and it is connected from above to the horizon of angels, acquiring through it the scientific and unseen perceptions. For the world of events exists in their understandings without time, and this is based on what we have presented of the precise arrangement in existence through the connection of their essences and powers with one another. Then this human soul is absent from sight, and its effects are apparent in the body, as if it and all its parts are gathered and separated instruments for the soul and its powers. As for the active powers, they are the movement of the hand, walking with the foot, speaking with the tongue, and the overall movement of the body in a coordinated manner. As for the perceiving powers, although the powers of perception are arranged and ascend to the higher power, and from the thinker, which is expressed as the speaking power, the apparent sensory powers with their instruments of hearing, sight, and others ascend to the inner, and its first is the common sense, which is the power that perceives the tangible in a visible, audible, and tangible state, and others at the same time. Thus it is separated from the apparent sensory power because tangible things do not crowd upon it at the same time. Then the common sense leads to the imagination, which is the power that represents the tangible thing in the soul, as it is abstracted from the external materials only. And the instrument of these two powers in their management is the first ventricle of the brain, the front for the first and the back for the second. Then the imagination ascends to the apprehensive and the memory. The apprehensive is for perceiving meanings related to personalities, like the enmity of Zayd, the friendship of Amr, the mercy of the father, and the predation of the wolf. And the memory is for storing all perceived things in imagination, and it is like a treasury that preserves them for when needed. The instrument of these two powers in their management is the back ventricle of the brain, the front for the first and the back for the second. Then all of them ascend to the power of thought, and its instrument is the middle ventricle of the brain, which is the power through which the movement of vision and direction towards understanding occurs, thus moving the soul with it, always due to the inclination instilled in it to escape from the grasp of the power and the readiness that belongs to humanity, and it emerges into action in its understanding, resembling the higher spiritual assembly, and it becomes in the first ranks of spiritualities in its perception without bodily instruments. It is always in motion and directed towards that, and it may completely detach from humanity and its spirituality to royalty from the higher horizon without acquisition, but by what God has placed in it, from the original nature and innate disposition in that. Types of human souls. The human souls are of three types. One type is naturally incapable of reaching, so it is limited in movement towards the lower direction, focusing on sensory and imaginative perceptions and the composition of meanings from memory and imagination based on restricted laws and a specific arrangement, from which they derive the conceptual and affirmative sciences that pertain to thought in the body, all of which are imaginary and limited in scope, as it ultimately ends at the primary principles and does not exceed them. If it deteriorates, what follows it deteriorates as well. This is, for the most part, the realm of human bodily perception, and it is where the knowledge of scholars culminates and their foundations are established. Another type is directed by that intellectual movement towards the spiritual intellect and perception that does not depend on bodily instruments due to the preparedness it possesses for that, thus expanding its scope of understanding beyond the primary principles, which are the realm of initial human perception, and it roams in the space of inner observations, all of which are realms from their origin and not from their end. These are the perceptions of the scholars, the saints, the people of religious sciences and divine knowledge, which are attained after death for the fortunate in the afterlife. Revelation. And the one who is naturally inclined to detach from humanity, both in its physical and spiritual aspects, is classified among the angels from the higher horizon, so that in a moment of moments he becomes an angel in reality and witnesses the higher assembly in their horizon, hearing the spiritual words and the divine discourse in that moment. These prophets, may God's blessings and peace be upon them, were granted by God the detachment from humanity in that moment, which is the state of revelation, a nature that God created them upon, and a disposition in which he fashioned them, freeing them from the impediments and obstacles of the body, as long as they were engaged with humanity through the inclinations and uprightness that they possess to align with that direction. He instilled in their natures a desire for worship that is revealed through that direction and flows towards it. They direct themselves to that horizon with that type of detachment whenever they wish, by that nature upon which they were created, not through acquisition or craftsmanship. Therefore, they directed themselves and detached from their humanity, receiving in that higher assembly what they receive, and they quickly return to human perceptions, descending into their faculties for the wisdom of conveying to the servants. Sometimes, one of them hears a sound like a hint of speech from which he derives the meaning that is conveyed to him, and the sound does not cease until he has comprehended and understood it. At other times, the angel appears to him as a man who speaks to him, and he comprehends what he says. The reception from the angel and the return to human perceptions and understanding is all conveyed to him as if it were in a single moment, even closer than the blink of an eye, for it is not in time. Rather, all of it occurs simultaneously, appearing as if it is swift. That is why it is called revelation, for revelation in language means hastening. Know that the first state, which is the sound, is the rank of the non-messenger prophets as they have established, and the second state, which is the representation of the angel as a man speaking, is the rank of the messenger prophets, and that is why it is more complete than the first. This is the meaning of the hadith in which the Prophet, peace be upon him, explained revelation when Al-Harith bin Hisham asked him, "How does revelation come to you?" He said, "Sometimes it comes to me like the ringing of a bell, and that is the hardest for me, and it departs from me, and I have comprehended what was said. And sometimes the angel appears to me as a man and speaks to me, and I comprehend what he says." The first was harder, because it is the beginning of the transition in that connection from potentiality to action, which makes it somewhat difficult. Therefore, when it quickly returns to human perceptions, it is limited to hearing, and other senses are more difficult. When revelation is repeated and the reception increases, that connection becomes easier. When it ascends to human perceptions, it encompasses all of them, especially the clearest of them, which is the perception of sight. The expression of comprehension in the first state is in the past tense, and in the second state in the present tense, which is a subtlety of eloquence, indicating that the speech came in the form of representation for the two states of revelation. The first state is represented by the sound, which is commonly not speech, and it is reported that understanding and comprehension follow it after its conclusion. Thus, it is appropriate to describe its conclusion and separation with the expression of comprehension in the past tense, corresponding to the conclusion and separation. The angel, in the second state, is represented as a man who speaks, and the speech corresponds with comprehension, making it appropriate to use the present tense, which implies renewal. Know that in the state of revelation, there is overall difficulty and intensity, as indicated by the Quran, where he says, "Indeed we will cast upon you a heavy word." Aisha said, "He used to suffer from the descent of revelation." She also said, "Revelation would descend upon him on a very cold day, and he would be released from it while his forehead was dripping with sweat. Therefore, he would experience in that state a form of fainting and unconsciousness, which is well known. The reason for this is that revelation, as we have established, is a departure from humanity to the angelic perceptions and receiving the words of the soul, which causes a great intensity of separation from the self itself, detaching from its horizon to that other horizon. This is the meaning of the fainting that he expressed at the beginning of Revelation when he said, "He covered me until I could bear no more. Then he sent me and said, 'Read.' I said, 'I am not a reader,' and so on for the second and third times, as in the hadith." Gradually, habituation may lead to some ease compared to what preceded it. Therefore, the descent of the stars of the Quran, its chapters and verses, was shorter when it was in Mecca than when it was in Medina. Consider what was reported about the descent of Surah Bara'ah during the Battle of Tabuk, that it was revealed entirely or mostly to him while he was riding on his camel, after it had been in Mecca, where some verses of shorter chapters were revealed at one time and the rest at another time. Likewise, the last verse revealed in Medina was the verse of debt, which is lengthy, after verses were revealed in Mecca, like those of Al-Rahman, Ad-Dariyat, Al-Muddathir, Al-Duha, Al-Falaq, and similar ones. Consider this as a distinguishing sign between Meccan and Medinan chapters and verses, and God is the guide to the truth. This is the essence of the matter of prophethood. Divination. As for divination, it is also one of the characteristics of the human soul, as we have previously established that the human soul has the potential to detach from humanity to a higher spirituality. This results in a glimpse for humans in the category of prophets, based on what they are naturally inclined to, and it is established that they receive this without acquisition or assistance from any of the faculties, concepts, or physical actions, whether in speech or movement, nor through any other means. It is merely a detachment from humanity to royalty by nature in a moment quicker than the blink of an eye. If this is the case, and this potential exists in human nature, then a rational classification is given, and there is another category of humans that is inferior to the first category, a deficiency that is the opposite of its complete counterpart. The lack of assistance in that perception is the opposite of assistance in it, and there is a vast difference between the two. If a classification of existence is given, there is another category of humans who are naturally inclined to have their intellectual power move in a mental motion by will when prompted by an inclination towards it, and they are deficient in their nature when hindered by their inability to do so, clinging to specific, tangible or imagined matters, such as transparent bodies, animal bones, and the rhythm of speech, and whatever comes to mind from birds or animals. This sensation or imagination persists, aiding them in the detachment they seek, and acts as a guide for it. This power within them is the source of that perception, which is divination. Because these souls are created with deficiency and incapacity for perfection, their perception of particulars is greater than that of universals. Therefore, their imagination is extremely powerful, as it is the tool for particulars, penetrating fully in sleep or wakefulness, and it is always present, ready to be summoned by the imagination, acting as a mirror in which they constantly look. The diviner cannot achieve perfection in understanding abstract concepts because their inspiration comes from the inspiration of the devil. The highest state of this category is to rely on speech that contains rhythm and balance to distract them from the senses and strengthen their connection to that incomplete perception, leading to a feeling in their heart about that movement, which is influenced by external factors that they express. Thus, they may sometimes speak the truth and align with reality, and at other times lie, as they complete their deficiency with something foreign to their perceiving self and distinct from it, leading to both truth and falsehood being possible, making them unreliable. They may also resort to conjectures and guesses in their eagerness to achieve perception, as they claim, and to mislead the questioners. Those who engage in this rhythmic speech are specifically referred to as diviners because they are the highest among their categories. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said regarding such speech, "This is from the rhythm of the diviners," thus making rhythm specific to them by implication. He also said to Ibn Sayyad, when he asked him about how he receives this matter, "It comes to me true and false," to which he replied, "The matter has become mixed for you," meaning that the essence of prophethood is truth, and it is never accompanied by falsehood, as it is a connection from the Prophet's essence to the higher assembly without any guide or assistance from an external source. Divination, on the other hand, requires its possessor, due to their incapacity, to rely on foreign concepts, which become part of their perception and become confused with the perception they are directed towards, leading to a mixture with falsehood from this angle, thus preventing it from being prophethood. We say that the highest rank of divination is the state of rhythm, because the meaning of rhythm is lighter than other hidden matters of the seen and heard, and the lightness of the meaning indicates the closeness of that connection and perception, and the distance from incapacity to some extent. Some people have claimed that this divination has ceased since the time of prophethood, due to the stoning of devils with meteors before the mission, and that this was to prevent them from news of the heavens, as mentioned in the Quran. Diviners only learn news of the heavens from devils, so divination ceased from that day onward. However, there is no evidence for this, as the knowledge of diviners can come from devils, as well as from their own souls, as we have established. Furthermore, the verse only indicates the prevention of devils from one type of news of the heavens, which is related to the news of the mission, and they were not prevented from anything else. Additionally, this cessation only occurred before the prophethood, and it may have returned afterward to what it was, which is the apparent case, as all these faculties become dormant during the time of prophethood, just as stars and lamps become dim in the presence of the sun. For prophethood is the greatest light that overshadows all other lights and extinguishes them. Some philosophers have claimed that it only exists before prophethood and then ceases, and this is the case for every prophecy that has occurred, for the existence of prophethood must have a celestial condition that necessitates it, and the completeness of that condition indicates the completeness of that prophethood. A deficiency in that condition necessitates the existence of a nature of that type that is deficient, which is the meaning of the diviner, as we have established. Before that complete condition is fulfilled, the incomplete condition occurs, necessitating the existence of a diviner, whether one or multiple. When that complete condition is fulfilled, the existence of the prophet is complete, and the conditions indicating such a nature cease to exist. Thus, nothing of it remains afterward. This is based on the assumption that some celestial conditions necessitate some of their effects, which is not necessarily accepted. Perhaps the condition only necessitates that effect in its pure form, and if some of its parts are deficient, it does not necessitate anything. Rather, it necessitates that effect in a deficient manner, as they have claimed. Moreover, if these diviners coexist with the time of prophethood, they are aware of the truth of the prophet and the indication of his miracle, as they have some awareness of the matter of prophethood, just as every person has awareness of the day, and the connection of that relationship is more intense for the diviner than for the sleeper. Nothing prevents them from that, and leads them to disbelief except the strength of their desires, thinking that it is prophethood for them, leading them to obstinacy, as was the case with Umayyah ibn Abi al-Salt, who hoped to prophecy, and likewise with Ibn Sayyad, Musaylimah, and others. When faith prevailed and those wishes ceased, they believed with the best of faith, as was the case with Tulayha al-Asadi and Suwad ibn Qarib, who had significant impacts in the Islamic conquests, testifying to their good faith. The vision. As for the vision, its reality is the contemplation of the speaking soul within its spiritual essence, a glimpse of the images of occurrences. When it is spiritual, the images of occurrences are indeed present, as is the case with all spiritual essences. It becomes spiritual by detaching from physical materials and bodily perceptions, and this can happen as a glimpse due to sleep, as we mention. It acquires knowledge of what it longs for regarding future matters and returns with it to its perceptions. If this acquisition is weak and not clear through imitation and example in the imagination, it requires interpretation due to this imitation. However, if the acquisition is strong, it does not require imitation, and thus does not need interpretation, as it is free from example and imagination. The reason for this glimpse occurring to the soul is that it is a spiritual essence in potential, completed by the body and its perceptions, until it becomes a purely rational essence, and its existence is completed in actuality, thus becoming a perceiving spiritual essence without any physical tools, although its type is in the realm of spiritual beings, unlike the type of angels who inhabit the higher horizons, as they have not completed their essences with anything from bodily perceptions or otherwise. This readiness is present for it as long as it is in the body, and it is specific, like that of the saints, and general for humanity as a whole, which is the matter of visions. As for that of the prophets, it is a readiness for shedding humanity to pure angelic existence, which is the highest of spiritual essences. This readiness manifests in them repeatedly in states of revelation, and when it ascends to bodily perceptions and what occurs in them of perception, it resembles the state of sleep in a clear way, although the state of sleep is much lower than it. For this reason, the legislator expressed the vision as being a part of 46 parts of prophecy. In one narration, 33, and in another 70. The number in all of them is not intended in itself. Rather, the aim is the abundance in the variation of these ranks, as evidenced by the mention of 70 in some of its narrations, which is for multiplication among the Arabs. What some have said in the narration of 46, that revelation was initially through vision for 6 months, which is half a year, and the total duration of prophecy in Mecca and Medina is 23 years, so half a year is a part of 46, is far from the truth. This is because it only occurred to the Prophet, peace be upon him, and how can we claim that this duration occurred for others among the prophets, especially since this only gives the ratio of the time of vision to the time of prophecy, and does not provide its reality from the reality of prophecy. If you understand this from what we have mentioned earlier, you will know that the meaning of this part is the ratio of the initial readiness encompassing humanity to the specific close readiness of the innate type of prophets, peace be upon them, as it is the distant readiness, even though it is general among humans, and it has many obstacles and impediments to its actualization. Among the greatest of those impediments are the external senses. God created humans with the ability to lift the veil of the senses through sleep, which is natural for them, so the soul is exposed, when this veil is lifted, to knowledge of what it longs for in the realm of truth, and at times it perceives a glimpse in which there is success in what is sought. For this reason, the legislator made it one of the good tidings, saying that nothing remains of prophecy except the good tidings. They asked, "What are the good tidings, O messenger of God?" He said, "The righteous vision that a righteous man sees, or it is seen for him." As for the reason for the lifting of the veil of the senses through sleep, it is as I described to you. The speaking soul perceives and acts through the animal spirit, which is a subtle vapor centered in the left cavity of the heart, as stated in the anatomical writings of Galen and others. It emanates with the blood in the arteries and veins, providing sensation, movement, and all bodily actions, and its subtlety rises to the brain, moderating its coldness and completing the actions of the faculties within it. The speaking soul perceives and understands through this vaporous spirit, and it is attached to it due to the wisdom of creation, which dictates that the subtle does not affect the dense. When this animal spirit becomes subtle among the bodily materials, it becomes a place for the effects of the essence that is different from it in its corporeality, which is the speaking soul, and its effects are realized in the body through it. We had previously stated that its perception is of two types: perception through the external, which is the five senses, and perception through the internal, which is the cerebral faculties. This entire perception diverts it from perceiving what is above it from its spiritual essences, which it is innately prepared for. Since the external senses are corporeal, they are subject to fatigue and failure due to the exertion and weariness they perceive, and the spirit is overwhelmed by excessive activity. Therefore, God created for it the need for rest to detach perception in the complete form, and this can only occur by the retreat of the animal spirit from all the external senses and its return to the internal sense. This is aided by what envelopes the body from the cold at night, prompting the innate heat to seek the depths of the body and retreat from its surface to its interior, thus accompanying its vehicle, which is the animal spirit, to the interior. For this reason, sleep for humans is generally at night. When the spirit retreats from the external senses and returns to the internal faculties, the distractions and impediments of the senses lessen, and it returns to the form that is in the memory, representing from it through composition and analysis imaginary images, most of which are habitual, because they are derived from the recently perceived objects. Then the common sense, which is the gathering of the external senses, descends them, perceiving them in the manners of the five external senses. Sometimes the soul may turn its attention to its spiritual essence while contending with the internal faculties, perceiving through its spiritual perception because it is innately inclined to it, and it acquires images of things that have become attached to its essence at that time. Then the imagination takes those perceived images and represents them in reality or imitation in the familiar forms, and the imitation from these is the one that requires interpretation. Its manipulation through composition and analysis in the forms of memory occurs before it perceives from that glimpse what it perceives as mere dreams. It is authentically reported that the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "The vision is of three types: a vision from God, a vision from the angel, and a vision from the devil." This detail corresponds to what we have mentioned. The clear vision is from God, The imitation that calls for interpretation is from the angel, and the mixed dreams are from the devil, as they are all false, and the devil is the source of falsehood. This is the reality of vision, and what causes it and spreads it from sleep. These are characteristics of the human soul present in humanity in general. No one among them is devoid of it. Rather, every human has seen in their sleep what has occurred to them in their wakefulness multiple times, and it has become certain for them that the soul perceives the unseen in sleep, and it must be so. If this is permissible in the realm of sleep, it is not impossible in other states, for the perceiving essence is one, and its characteristics are general in every state. And God is the guide to the truth by His grace and favor,